So this is the big one. This is episode 4 of the working title of Conveyancing Emerging from Lockdown in Northern Ireland. I need to work on that title. This is the post this week that I actually have really dreaded. It is the idea that we may have to build some flexibility into a process, a legal process, which obviously is based on certainty. But take this example for just for a moment. Let's say that the lockdown is loosened, and as what happened in England last week, the Northern Ireland property market miraculously reopens to some level of normality, whatever that is. We have a chain set up on the day of completion. Someone in the chain, not our client, not our vendor, not our purchaser, someone in the chain falls ill with symptoms of COVID-19 on the day of completion. They must self-isolate. They cannot move house. All bets are off. And obviously then no one in the chain can complete. Normally what would happen would be that potentially the person at the end of the chain who defaults is going to be served with a notice to complete, and then every other party in the chain will be served with a notice to complete. There will be all sorts of compensation claims made, and some poor so-and-so at the very end of the chain is going to be liable, more or less, essentially for everyone's loss as a result of that failure to complete on that day. That's a very simplistic view of what notice to complete actually are, but that is essentially the position. It also dovetails in with a post I did yesterday, which has on LinkedIn had over 6,000 6,000 views already, which is unusual for me. And that is where the exact opposite of flexibility is happening. And we have a couple of clients in cases where the developer via the estate agent, who should know better, is essentially threatening that our clients will lose their property, their new build property, unless they sign a contract for a November, December completion within the next few weeks, somehow expecting that our clients, the purchasers of our client's house, would also be happy to sign a binding contract for completion sometimes towards the end of this year, given all the uncertainty. The same developers, I must say, who in their final accounts helpfully issue penalty calculations for how much extra penalty must be paid for each day that a particular case is delayed. So that's the sort of thing we're dealing with. You can imagine someone with COVID-19 symptoms at one end of the chain, a developer at the other end of the chain who is charging several £100s a day just as a financial sanction for not completing when they actually want to. And these are the things that we're going to have to deal with when we come back to a new normal, unless there is some level of flexibility. I talked yesterday about clients needing to have confidence in the process. Normally, pre-COVID, confidence was about certainty. Post-COVID or during COVID, confidence in the process will actually be about flexibility. Now, that brings me to England and Wales. The English Law Society has produced guidance and has actually produced a variation agreement. And that is actually to be used for parties who, it's limited circumstances, but it's parties who have already, they say, have already exchanged. I suppose in Northern Ireland we would say that they're already in contract, but completion has not yet taken place and obviously has been delayed due to coronavirus and lockdown and what have you. And as I say, they have a variation agreement, they have guidance for that, and it basically will build flexibility into contracts where there wasn't particularly a lot of flexibility up to that point. That is very useful. I think that's something which people in England who are in that position will certainly sign up to. But it also then leaves the position of what happens if you haven't already entered into contract. And I have to say at that point that the guidance is particularly less helpful. The government advice on home moving during the corona outbreak, this is just for England. It's for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And it's like 11 pages long, and conveyancers get 3 or 4 lines, and it says, conveyancers should do what they can to promote flexibility, making provisions for the risks presented by coronavirus. For example, when advising their clients who are ready to move, not to exchange contracts on an occupied property unless they have made explicit provision for the risks presented by the virus. What they actually mean is we have to somehow come up with a set of special conditions which covers all of the potential events which could occur in our current situation with coronavirus, which may delay or otherwise impact on the conveyancing process and the ability of parties to complete at a certain date at a certain time. That is going to be incredibly difficult. And where do we actually go from there? There is no doubt in my mind that in Northern Ireland, we are going to have to potentially look at a variation agreement for existing contracts in place. But also I feel, and this is my own personal view, that we need to agree as a profession a set of special conditions for all contracts that all clients, including developers, will sign up to allow an element of flexibility in the process, so that if there is a COVID event, I suppose, will be defined. If there is a COVID event at some point before completion and completion has to be delayed, now I'm not talking about it being completely irreparably damaged or contracts being rescinded or people withdrawing from contracts. This is simply about delaying the completion date until everyone can safely complete. Unless we as a profession can actually agree a standard set of special conditions, then I don't honestly see how we can get back to work and have anything like a decent and flexible property market. The idea, by the way, of individually negotiating, yes, we have a set of special conditions that we looked at the start of the lockdown, and some we agreed with other solicitors, some we didn't agree with other solicitors. But the idea of individually negotiating different contracts with different solicitors under so much pressure to complete from clients and other stakeholders in the profession, in the property market, it's a complete and utter non-starter. The only way we can do this is a set of special conditions which are agreed throughout the profession, and that everyone, no matter what the state of the vendor or the purchaser, or whether they're a company or whether they're a mortgagee in possession or whether they are, and I emphasize this, a developer, they have to simply agree to be flexible, and we need to mandate this. There's no way of it being voluntarily done. I have to say, this is a debate which is ongoing within the profession at the moment. There's been no official statement or guidance from the Law Society of Northern Ireland. But I must say the Law Society has shown itself over the last weeks and months to be very responsive to whatever the narrative is in the profession at the moment. And as I say, I hope that is something which can be taken on board. It's not just the legal profession which will have to sign up to that, essentially a protocol or a code of practice. The estate agents and particularly I think the developers will have to sign up to that as well. And as I say, and I actually for once make no apology for repeating myself, there is no doubt the only way that we are going to get our nascent property market back into some sort of operation in Northern Ireland is by every single person involved in the property moving process to agree to be flexible. And if that means disappointment on the day of completion at the very last minute, well then that is what it is going to take. Let's be honest, in most cases people are being sensible, and hopefully these events shouldn't arise on a particularly common basis. But there are definitely going to be cases where someone on the day of completion has some sort of symptoms and they should be self-isolating, and the idea that they are under pressure of being sued under contract if they don't complete, and feeling that they have to actually physically move house and potentially infect other people, is something that nobody should want to be responsible for. So as I say, this sounds quite preachy today, but this is something I feel very strongly about. As I say, the post I did yesterday about some of our clients being threatened and pressurized to put themselves into really binding contracts now for the end of this year is the sort of lunacy that we have to really guard against. So as I say, you'll probably hear much more about this. That's episode 4. Thanks for watching, and more tomorrow.